about the greatest military failures in history. The mighty panzer divisions violently halted. They were not destroyed by heavy artillery shells. Instead, they froze in the brutal eastern mud. Their heavy tank wheels and truck tires disintegrated. The terrifying speed of mechanized warfare demanded the quiet resilience of natural rubber. The Axis powers faced total collapse. Allied blockades severed access to crucial tropical plantations. Overnight, the German military lost its primary supply. The geopolitical economic trap snapped completely shut immediately. When global supply chains sever a critical resource, empires must synthesize survival or face absolute ruin. Let us examine this bizarre logistical and financial nightmare. But how do you fight a global war without the very materials that make your machines move? The desperate empire faced absolute starvation. They were completely severed from natural tropical rubber. Southeast Asian plantations fell under heavy Allied blockades. The industrial war machine simply could not function. Without flexible seals, every panzer tank becomes useless. The human cost of this resource deficit would soon demand a terrifying toll. To survive a total blockade, a militarized state must artificially manufacture the very elements of nature. Leadership demanded an immediate alchemical miracle. The state partnered heavily with the corporate giant. IG Farben promised to synthesize artificial rubber rapidly. They called this new synthetic material Buna rubber. It was chemically derived from domestic coal supplies. Extracting this synthetic lifeline required diverting massive civilian resources toward monumental chemical factories. The staggering capital investment into artificial synthesis became the most expensive industrial gamble in wartime history. This is where the macroeconomic scale becomes truly terrifying. The economic scale was completely unprecedented. Massive industrial complexes devoured vast amounts of electricity. The synthesis process required extreme thermodynamic energy levels. Coal extraction demands skyrocketed across the entire nation. Thousands of tons of raw materials were consumed. Civilian grids were systematically stripped to feed the ravenous chemical reactors of war. Redirecting national energy to synthesize a single strategic resource fundamentally destabilizes the broader domestic civilian economy. The human toll accelerated incredibly rapidly. Building these massive plants required endless physical labor. The state forcibly conscripted thousands of desperate workers. Prisoners of war were driven into the factories. Slavery became the hidden backbone of synthetic chemistry. Countless innocent lives were brutally extinguished to construct the towering metal vats of Buna. When capital resources are entirely exhausted, desperate regimes will violently consume human bodies to maintain production. At first, the gamble seemed to pay off. The propaganda machine declared absolute victory. Production quotas supposedly reached magnificent new industrial heights, and the thousands of black tires rolled off assembly lines. The synthetic product looked exactly like natural rubber. Generals believed they had bypassed the economic chokehold. This manufactured illusion of logistical invincibility pushed commanders toward a catastrophic and arrogant overextension. A state built on artificial chemical solutions will inevitably base its strategic warfare on dangerous illusions. Operation Barbarossa launched with tremendous arrogance. Millions of mechanized units charged toward the east. They rolled entirely on artificial Buna rubber treads. Supply trucks carried essential fuel across vast distances.
Well done, Comrade Major.
The initial blitzkrieg appeared to be completely unstoppable. The cold reality of synthetic chemistry waited quietly within the harsh Russian terrain. GB, ignoring the physical limitations of synthesized materials, ensures the catastrophic collapse of extended military supply chains. The national treasury bled out entirely. Every single synthetic tire cost a vast fortune. The financial ledgers revealed an unsustainable economic nightmare. Natural rubber was cheap, but Buna was astronomical. The Axis essentially bankrupted themselves for basic tires. This gross misallocation of sovereign wealth demonstrates the devastating paralysis of desperate technological substitution. Siphoning gross domestic product into experimental chemistry ultimately starves the core logistical foundations of the market. But the real danger wasn't financial. It was molecular. The synthetic polymer held dark secrets. Chemists secretly knew the molecular bonds were unstable. The rapid manufacturing process bypassed crucial quality controls. These tires were structurally inferior to natural rubber. The government ignored these terrifying scientific internal warnings. Political demands for rapid output completely overwhelmed the cautious realities of rigorous chemical engineering. Authoritarian suppression of scientific limitations will invariably transform a strategic industrial miracle into a tactical liability. The supply network stretched incredibly thin. Millions of men relied on continuous truck deliveries. Ammunition and food rolled on these synthetic tires. Every moving part contained artificial rubber sealing rings. The entire Eastern invasion depended on chemical gaskets. Frontline infantry survival rested entirely upon the fragile integrity of synthesized chemical molecules. Or when an empire anchors its entire logistical network to experimental materials, a singular failure becomes systemic. They built factories near the camps. IG Farben constructed monoliths specifically for this purpose. This dark synergy of industry and brutal genocide. Human beings were literally worked into the ground. The economic efficiency calculations included the death rate. Corporate ledgers coldly reduced human suffering into an operating expense for synthetic rubber. The absolute weaponization of enslaved labor represents the darkest, most terrifying extreme of desperate wartime economics. And yet, the physics simply did not add up. The thermodynamic energy demands were astronomical. Producing 1 ton of Buna required vast power. It consumed more electricity than entire modern cities. Coal plants burned day and night without stopping. This massive drain critically weakened other war industries. The desperate pursuit of synthetic tires silently crippled the national capacity for steel. Macroeconomic resource diversion always creates catastrophic, invisible shortages across seemingly unrelated sectors of the defense industry. The domestic populace was completely deceived. Newsreels proudly displayed the glorious new Buna factories. Citizens believed their nation was scientifically self-sufficient. The underlying financial ruin was hidden from public. Stock prices for chemical conglomerates soared artificially high. This grand deception masked the terrifying fragility of a supply chain nearing collapse. Propaganda serves as a temporary fiat currency, buying domestic compliance while the actual physical economy rots. The mechanical burden was steadily compounding. Each Panzer tank weighed over 20 heavy tons. These monstrous machines exerted immense pressure on tires. Supply trucks were heavily overloaded with essential ammunition. The convoy routes were unforgiving, rough, and endless. The brutal demands of mechanized warfare exceeded the limits of early artificial chemistry. When strategic ambition outpaces material science, the resulting friction inevitably destroys the physical instruments of conquest. The summer offensive hid looming disasters. The warm weather temporarily masked the chemical flaws. Commanders pushed their armored columns deeper into Russia. The logistical tail grew dangerously long and thin. Replacement tires were already becoming impossible to secure. In advancing into enemy territory, exponentially increased the strain on the fragile supply chain. Extending a military front while relying on degrading synthetic materials guarantees a catastrophic logistical rubber snap. But nature always collects its debts. The Great War Machine secretly died. The financial ledgers could no longer hide reality. The massive alchemical gamble was fundamentally breaking down. The synthetic tires began to show microscopic fractures. The Eastern Front was about to change permanently. The empire mortgaged its future on a synthetic molecule that was fundamentally flawed. A sovereign state cannot rewrite the universal laws of thermodynamics through desperate investments and fascist decree. The terrifying physical reality quickly arrived. The fundamental laws of physics demanded absolute payment, and under the immense dynamic load of 25 tons, sustained high-speed friction generated incredible internal heat buildup. Early synthetic Buna lacked essential, natural elastic properties. The friction caused catastrophic delamination of the treads right off the metal wheels. Unlike natural rubber, early synthetic polymers simply could not dissipate the massive thermal energy of warfare. The mechanical forces literally tore themselves. Tanks and trucks shed their vital, synthetic skins. The rapid molecular breakdown halted advancing supply columns. A truck cannot deliver ammunition without its tires. The entire mechanized philosophy suddenly stopped moving forward. The Axis commanders watched helplessly as their logistical spines snapped under internal pressure. When a single synthesized component fails mechanically, the entire multi-billion-dollar mechanized army grinds to a halt. Then, the temperature dropped. The Russian winter hit with vengeance. The devastating drop in temperature exposed the fatal flaw. Sub-zero conditions drastically altered the artificial molecular structure. The material's glass transition temperature was a nightmare. The synthetic rubber instantly lost all vital flexibility. Engine gaskets and seals simply blew apart under the immense freezing pressure. In extreme cold, the synthetic polymer did not just go flat. It shattered completely like fragile glass. The machines devoured themselves entirely. Without flexible seals, the vital engine oil leaked. The freezing mud trapped the immobilized panzer tanks. Supply trucks full of winter clothing were stranded. The Blitzkrieg was physically grounded in the snow. The freezing soldiers on the front lines died, waiting for a resupply that could never arrive. The collapse of a synthesized molecular bond ultimately snapped the entire overextended geopolitical supply chain. The logistical graveyard stretched for miles. The domino effect of failure was completely unstoppable. Supply trucks could not deliver essential winter clothing. Ammunition and vital fuel shipments never reached destinations. The formidable Blitzkrieg was physically grounded and starved. Millions of freezing men were abandoned because a microscopic synthetic bond had failed. The mechanical breakdown of a single synthesized component paralyzed the most expensive mechanized army in history. This is what happens when you try to outsmart physics. The ultimate cost was profoundly devastating. We must analyze this massive failure of economics. The empire spent billions of heavily inflated Reichsmarks. They consumed massive amounts of domestic electrical power. They built towering chemical factories using slave labor. They violently exhausted their human and financial capital to manufacture their own destruction. The regime successfully engineered a chemical product that effectively sabotaged their military from the inside out. The generational debt was permanently cemented. The shattered rubber left a devastating historical legacy. The nation was bankrupt both financially and morally. Billions in wealth were vaporized into toxic smoke. The logistical graveyard represented a total national collapse. The long-term cost of this chemical arrogance was paid with millions of frozen lives. When a wartime economy gambles its survival on untested science, the citizens inherit an unpayable debt. Thermodynamics ignores all desperate fascist decrees. A government can aggressively print endless fiat money. A regime can violently synthesize complex chemical compounds. Propaganda can declare total victory over natural resources. But no army can successfully negotiate with friction. The brutal laws of mechanical engineering will ultimately collapse any economy built on pure illusions. The Buna rubber crisis proves that sophisticated financial ledgers cannot rewrite the absolute realities of physics. This is the price of chaos. History repeatedly hides its deepest secrets within logistics. The true cost of war is strictly mathematical. Empires fall when their fundamental resources completely shatter. Onker, we must study these bizarre economic failures. Join us again to uncover the terrifying financial machinery that quietly directs global conflicts. If you want to understand how empires afford their ruin, subscribe to The Price of Chaos.